Good morning, church family. Today we're going to finish up Luke chapter 22 as we do our reading. And so let's start in verse 66. It says, at daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and teachers of the law, met together. And Jesus was led before them. If you are the Messiah, they said, tell us. Jesus answered, if I tell you, you will not believe me. And if I asked you, you would not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God. They all asked, are you then the Son of God? And he replied, you say that I am. Then they said, why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips. You know, it's interesting. Jesus here is brought before the Sanhedrin, and the ruling class, they'd already really assumed, or they'd already made a decision about how they would view Jesus. And I think that about our own hearts at times, that so often we are quick to make judgments about individuals and about our circumstances and our situation. And as a result of that, we end up entering into what we call self-fulfilling prophecy, that the way that we've assumed things is the only way it can be done. And so when things unfold as they do, we see how it fits to our narrative about how things should be. Jesus responds to this and he says, hey, if I tell you that I'm the Messiah, then you will say that, of course I am not, and that I'm blasphemous. And yet if I ask you, who do you think that I am? You will call me blasphemous because you think that I am a false Messiah. Because it doesn't matter. We're not sitting here to actually discern and find judgment and find where is it that God is leading and directing, but you have already made up your decision. And there's great danger in this, in how we live our lives, and this oftentimes becomes the obstacle between our relationship and God. Is that we already have predetermined how things should occur, why things are happening, and what is supposed to be yet to come. But Jesus reminds us that it is God and God alone who judges. You know, so often we think about this as God being the one who is the judge and authority, and he is the one who deems something good and something bad, someone just and someone unjust. But that idea of the fact that God judges has greater implications when we see about from the perspective that God judges in accordance with our hearts. That God sees and knows the circumstances and situations that we face in this life, and he has already deemed it, whether it's good or ungood, if you will, good or bad, or for our good or not for our good. And he has deemed that already. And so when we make an assumption about how it should be, that assumption oftentimes puts us at odds with the Lord, because that assumption is made from our perspective, from our will, and from our finite positioning in regard to our circumstances and situations. But that's not where God is limited. God sees even greater and beyond our circumstances and situations. He sees beyond the moments and the limitation of things. And he has the power and the ability to weave things that on the surface appear not for our good, and weave it into his perfection. I mean, that's exactly what he does, and we will do as we finish out Luke, as Jesus goes to the cross. The perfect symbol of death lined out by the Roman government. It was to strike fear in the hearts of all the adversaries of Rome. But in God's hands, the cross has become a symbol of life instead of death. It has become a symbol of God's authority over everything else. It has become a symbol of victory and conquering, not by an empire, but by a humble king, King Jesus, who was willing to be obedient to God's will, even when it didn't seem to make sense on the purpose, trusting that God would work good from that which man intended for evil. And as a result of that, you and I might wear crosses around our necks, or might hang them in our home or the places we go to worship. It sits in the front to remind us that God judges, not us. That God's ways are higher than our ways, and his will is better than our will. It reminds us to surrender, because in doing so, God will transform our lives from momentary things to eternal glories. That God will take the brokenness of our life and He'll turn it into the story of redemption. This is what God desires to do if we allow Him to judge our circumstances and situations and we walk in His ways instead of ours. My prayer and encouragement to you is that that's how we begin to shift and change things. Maybe for you, you've been working under your own assumptions for far too long. You've been the own judge of your circumstances, situations, and you've realized it has gotten you stuck. And maybe today is the day to be unstuck, to allow your eyes to be open, to be seen, to see things the way God sees it. If that's you, comment in the section below. We'd love to pray with you, encourage you, build you up, and continue to point you towards Christ. Look forward to continue on in Luke chapter 23 tomorrow as we continue in our readings through the book of Luke.